My daughter-in-law tried to force me into a nursing home to take my estate, but I had already rewritten my will. I stood in my garden, the smell of damp earth and blooming roses filling my nose. Suddenly, the gate clicked open. My daughter-in-law, Tiffany, walked in. She was wearing a fake, pouty face that I knew meant trouble. Behind her were two large men in white scrubs. They looked like they belonged in a hospital, not my backyard. "It is for the best, Antonia," Tiffany said, her voice sounding like honey poured over poison. "You forgot to turn the stove off twice this week. We cannot have you burning down this beautiful estate, can we?" My heart skipped a beat as I looked toward the kitchen window. My stove was gas, and I had not cooked a single thing in days. I realized then that Tiffany had turned the dials herself. She was staging my madness to steal my life. Tiffany stepped closer and pushed a cold metal clipboard into my shaking hand. "Just a small signature, Antonia. It is for a simple consultation at Silver Oaks," she whispered. I looked down at the paper and felt a chill run through my bones. I recognized the logo at the top of the page. Silver Oaks was not a nice place. Everyone in town knew it was a luxury prison for the elderly. It was where rich families sent people they wanted to forget. I looked past Tiffany and saw my son, Marcus. He was standing by the driveway, staring at the ground. He refused to meet my eyes. In his hand, he was clutching a shiny brochure for a brand new Ferrari. He was already spending the money he thought he was about to inherit from my misery. Before I could even open my mouth to protest, the two men grabbed my arms. They escorted me toward a waiting black SUV with dark windows. I felt like a criminal being taken away in the middle of the day. As they pushed me into the back seat, I looked back at my beautiful home. Tiffany was already busy. She was waving her hands and directing a team of movers into my front door. "Do not worry about your emeralds or your gold, Antonia. I will keep everything very safe in my own closet," she yelled with a wicked laugh. As the car pulled away, I saw her pick up my grandmother's hand-carved rocking chair. With a grunt, she tossed it right into a dirty dumpster. If you want to see how I take my house back, hit subscribe for more revenge stories. The doors at Silver Oaks locked with a heavy, metallic thud behind me. Inside, the walls were a dull gray, and the air smelled like bleach. A woman with eyes as hard as flint stood at the front desk. She was the head nurse. Without saying a word, she took away my phone and my gold watch. "Your daughter-in-law gave us medical power of attorney," the nurse said coldly. "That means you stay here until we say you are fit to leave. You are under our rules now." I looked around the room and saw other seniors sitting in silence, looking like ghosts. My stomach turned into a hard knot. I realized that the evaluation paper Tiffany forced me to sign was actually a permanent commitment form. I was officially a prisoner in a place built for profit. I sat on the thin mattress in my tiny room and closed my eyes. My mind traveled back to the 1990s. I remembered the long nights I spent working until my fingers bled. I had built my real estate empire starting from just one tiny studio apartment. I skipped many meals back then just to make sure Marcus had the very best education and the finest clothes. I did everything for that boy. I thought I was building a legacy for my family to be proud of. But as I sat in the dark, I remembered the day Marcus first brought Tiffany home. She did not look at me with kindness. She looked at my mansion and my jewelry the same way a hungry lion looks at a gazelle in the tall grass. The memories of the past few weeks felt like a bad dream. 1 month ago, I was walking down the stairs when I felt a sudden shove. Tiffany had tripped over her own feet, sending me tumbling down the hardwood steps. As I lay there, bruised and gasping for air, she didn't call for help. Instead, she leaned over me and whispered into my ear. Her breath was cold against my skin. "You're getting so frail, Antonia," she sneered. "Maybe it is time to hand over the keys to the estate before you really get hurt next time." I looked into her eyes and saw no love, only greed. That was the night I knew my life was in danger. I realized I had to protect myself. That was the exact night I secretly contacted my old friend, the ghost lawyer. Back in my tiny room at Silver Oaks, I waited until the hallway was quiet. I reached into the hidden pocket I had sewn into the hem of my heavy winter coat. I pulled out a second, tiny cell phone that Tiffany didn't know I owned. My heart pounded in my chest as I dialed the number for Mr. Sterling. He answered on the first ring. "They did it, Arthur. Phase 1 is complete. I am inside the facility," I whispered, keeping my eyes on the small window in the door. I heard him take a deep breath on the other end. "The bait has been taken, Antonia," Mr. Sterling replied. "Let them think they have won the war for now. We have everything ready for the next move." I hid the phone again, feeling a small spark of hope. A week later, Tiffany came to visit me. She walked into the room looking like a queen. She was wearing my favorite emerald necklace, the one my husband gave me for our wedding anniversary. She leaned in close to me, and the smell of her expensive, cloying perfume made me want to gag. "Sign the house over to Marcus today, and I will move you to a room with a big window," she said with a smug grin. She thought I was broken and ready to give up. But as she leaned forward, I noticed something strange. There was a faint red mark on her neck. It was a hickey that definitely did not belong to my son, Marcus. Tiffany was playing a very dangerous game behind my son's back, and I was just starting to see the truth. After she left, I pulled out my secret phone. I used it to access the cloud sync security cameras I had hidden all over my mansion months ago. I watched the live video feed on the tiny screen. My blood ran cold. There was Tiffany in my master bedroom, but she was not alone. She was with the man who called himself our wealth manager. He was the one who helped her trick me into the nursing home. They were not just working together, they were sleeping together. I listened as they discussed their plan to liquidate all my property and stocks. They were planning to steal every penny and flee to the Cayman Islands. They were going to leave Marcus with absolutely nothing but a pile of debt and a broken heart. Marcus came to visit me the next afternoon. He looked miserable and thin. His eyes were red, like he had been crying or not sleeping. "Mom, Tiffany says the bills for this place are huge," he said, staring at his shoes. "She says we need to sell the summer house in the mountains just to keep you here and pay for your care." He looked like a lost little boy. I realized in that moment that my son was not the true villain. He was just a pawn in Tiffany's sick game. She had blinded him with her beauty and her lies. He was so controlled by her that he was helping her rob him of his own future. I wanted to scream the truth, but I had to stay quiet for my plan to work. I sat in the dim light of my room, thinking about how this all began. I remembered the night Marcus first met Tiffany at a charity gala. She had used every trick in the book to seduce my son. In my memory, I saw the calculated way she started to isolate him. She told him his old friends were bad influences and replaced them with people she could control, like that crooked wealth manager. She turned my son into a stranger right before my eyes. I also remembered a gala from 6 months ago. I had seen Tiffany leaning over Marcus's glass, dropping a small blue pill into his champagne when she thought no one was looking. She had been drugging him for months to keep him foggy and compliant. She didn't want a husband, she wanted a puppet she could manipulate. I knew I had to act fast before they sold my legacy. I did not plan to break out of Silver Oaks by climbing through a window or jumping a fence. I was going to break out legally and destroy them from the inside. I spent 3 days watching my secret camera feed on my hidden phone. One afternoon, I hit the record button at the perfect time. I captured the head nurse entering my room while I pretended to sleep. Tiffany was there too, handing the nurse a thick envelope stuffed with $100 bills. "Keep her sedated and quiet," Tiffany hissed. "I don't want her talking to any state inspectors." I saved the video to 3 different cloud drives and sent it to the state licensing board using an anonymous email. My trap was finally beginning to set. While I was trapped in that gray room, Tiffany decided to move even faster. She organized a massive estate sale at my mansion. She told everyone I was too far gone to ever return home. Through my hidden cameras, I watched strangers walking through my hallways, touching my things. Tiffany was selling off my entire life for pennies to her greedy friends. She sold my vintage china, my silk rugs, and even my late husband's library. I watched her sip wine and laugh loudly with the wealth manager in my kitchen. "The old bat is never coming back to this place," she told a buyer while holding up my favorite silver teapot. "Everything must go today. We need the cash for our trip." I gripped my phone so hard my knuckles turned white. I watched her throw my history away. The next day, a man dressed as a priest arrived at Silver Oaks. The guards let him in without a second thought. It was actually Mr. Sterling, my ghost lawyer. We met in the small, quiet confessional booth in the nursing home chapel. The wooden walls felt like a sanctuary. Through the screen, I whispered the details of the bribery video I had captured. Mr. Sterling slid a thick stack of papers through the small opening. "This is the final version of the will, Antonia." "It is ironclad," he whispered. I took a pen from my pocket and signed my name with a steady hand. I didn't just cut Marcus and Tiffany out of the inheritance. I left the entire estate to a very specific, hostile entity that would make Tiffany's life a living nightmare. Subscribe now to see the look on Tiffany's face when the law arrives. 2 days later, the quiet of the nursing home was shattered by sirens. The state licensing board and the police raided Silver Oaks. They had the video of the bribery and records of the illegal sedation. The head nurse was led away in handcuffs, screaming that she was innocent. Because of the administrative errors and the evidence of abuse, I was immediately released into the care of my legal team. The police offered to drive me home, but I declined. I didn't want Tiffany to see me coming yet. I went straight to a secret penthouse hotel suite that Mr. Sterling had booked under a fake name. I stood on the balcony, looking out at the city lights. For the first time in weeks, I felt like the queen of my empire again. The real war was about to start. The lights of the mansion were blazing as I stepped out of my private car. Tiffany and Marcus were throwing a loud party to celebrate their new fortune. They thought I was still in the back of a transport van, being moved to a different facility across the state. The driveway was packed with expensive cars that belonged to Tiffany's shallow friends. Music was thumping through the walls, shaking the very foundation I had worked so hard to build. I could see people dancing in my living room through the floor-to-ceiling windows. They were drinking my vintage wine and eating off the few plates Tiffany hadn't sold yet. I took a deep breath and adjusted my silk jacket. I felt a cold, sharp calm wash over me. I was a ghost returning to haunt my own house, and I was ready to roar. I pushed the front doors open. They swung wide, hitting the walls with a loud bang. I walked straight into the center of the foyer, my heels clicking sharply on the marble floor. The music died instantly. One by one, the guests stopped talking and turned to stare. Tiffany was standing near the grand staircase, holding a crystal glass. When she saw me, her face went from a smug smile to a mask of pure terror. She dropped her champagne glass, and it shattered into 1,000 pieces at her feet. "Antonia? You are supposed to be in transit," she stammered, her voice shaking like a leaf. I gave her a slow, thin smile that didn't reach my eyes. "The only thing in transit tonight, Tiffany, is your belongings. They are leaving this house immediately." I felt powerful. Tiffany tried to step forward, her face turning a bright, angry red. "You can't just walk in here. You are mentally unfit," she screamed, looking around for support. But her friends were already backing away. I stepped aside to reveal the tall man who had followed me inside. He wasn't a mover or a lawyer. He was a federal marshal, and he looked like he was made of stone. He didn't even look at Tiffany. He walked straight past her toward the wealth manager, who was trying to sneak out the back door. "Stop right there," the marshal barked. The marshal wasn't there for me. He was there to arrest the wealth manager for embezzlement and wire fraud. Tiffany tried to hide her face behind a pillar, but the marshal turned his cold gaze on her. "Don't go anywhere, Mrs. Johnson. We have many questions." While the marshal handled the criminals, I grabbed Marcus by his arm. I pulled him into the library and locked the door. He looked like he was waking up from a deep, dark sleep. His eyes were unfocused and filled with confusion. "Mom, I don't understand. Tiff said you were sick," he whispered. I didn't say a word. I pulled out my phone and played the video of Tiffany and the wealth manager in our master bedroom. I watched Marcus's face as he heard them laughing about leaving him with nothing. I watched him see his wife in the arms of another man. Marcus turned pale and suddenly vomited into a wastebasket. The fog of the drugs and Tiffany's manipulation finally cleared from his mind. He looked at me with pure horror and realized he had almost helped kill his own mother. We walked back out into the living room just as Tiffany was having a total meltdown. She realized her plan was falling apart like wet paper. She started screaming at the top of her lungs, claiming she earned this life. She said she deserved my money for putting up with an old woman like me for so long. She looked like a wild animal. In a fit of rage, she reached for a valuable marble statue on the side table, intending to smash it on the floor. I moved faster than she expected. I grabbed her wrist with a strength she didn't know an older woman could have. I squeezed hard until she dropped the stone. "Touch one more thing in this house, Tiffany, and I will add vandalism to your long rap sheet," I whispered. She finally stopped screaming and began to sob. Tiffany fell to her knees on the marble floor, her face streaked with black mascara. She looked around at the silent crowd, realizing nobody was coming to save her. "You cannot kick me out," she suddenly screamed, clutching her stomach with both hands. "I am pregnant. I am carrying Marcus's only heir." The room went quiet again. Marcus took a step forward, his face filled with a sudden, painful hope. I felt a pang of pity for my son's desperation, but I knew the truth. I reached into my silk pocket and pulled out a crumpled medical report I had fished out of her trash weeks ago. "That is a lie, Tiffany," I said loudly. "According to these records, you had your tubes tied 5 years ago." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus stopped in his tracks, his heart breaking for the last time. I did not want to wait for the sun to rise to cleanse my home of her presence. I signaled to the security team I had hired to wait outside. "Get her out," I commanded. Tiffany tried to fight them, scratching and biting like a feral cat, but they were professionals. They dragged her toward the front door while she screamed curses at me. I had already prepared for this moment. I had her suitcases, the cheap ones she used before she married into my money, packed with her basic clothes and tossed onto the wet driveway. She stood in the rain, surrounded by her bags, looking small and defeated. Marcus walked to the entrance, his hand trembling as he gripped the heavy brass handle. He looked at her one last time before he slammed the door and turned the deadbolt. The lock clicked with finality. The party guests fled the house like rats leaving a sinking ship. Soon, it was just Marcus and me standing in the wreckage of the living room. The house was a mess of spilled drinks and discarded trash. I walked over to my favorite velvet wingback chair. It was the only piece of furniture Tiffany had not sold, mostly because she complained it looked too old for her modern taste. As I sat down, I felt a hard lump beneath the cushion. I reached under and pulled out a small, black plastic disc. It was a bugging device Tiffany had planted to listen to my private conversations. I crushed it beneath my heel without a word. I realized then that her greed was even deeper than I had imagined. She had wanted to own my thoughts as well as my money. As the night faded into a gray morning, I sat by the window and thought about the women Tiffany invited to the house. I realized Tiffany did not work alone. She belonged to a social circle of predatory daughters-in-law who all shared tips on how to manipulate their husbands and steal from their in-laws. They were a network of vultures waiting for us to grow weak. I looked at Marcus, who was sitting on the floor with his head in his hands. He was safe now, but the damage was done. My anger didn't go away with Tiffany's eviction. Instead, it grew cold and sharp. I decided right then that I would not just protect my own house. I was going to take down every single person who helped her. The real revenge was just beginning. I spent the next week working day and night with Mr. Sterling. My first move was to create the Anthonia Foundation for Elder Protection. It sounded like a charity, but it was my weapon. I used my vast wealth to find out who really owned the debt on Tiffany's parents' modest home. Within 48 hours, I had purchased their mortgage from the bank. I picked up the phone and dialed Tiffany's new burner number. When she answered, she sounded tired and broken. "I own your mother's house now, Tiffany," I said, my voice as steady as a heartbeat. "Every payment they make now comes to me. One wrong move, one lie to the police, and I will put them on the street." I hung up before she could speak. Phase 2 of my justice had officially started. Subscribe to see me dismantle her world. I did not stop with her parents' house. I wanted Tiffany to feel the walls of the city closing in on her. I used my long-standing influence in the community to speak with the owners of every high-end club, salon, and boutique. I told them the truth about what she had done to me. By the end of the week, her name was on every digital blacklist in town. 2 days later, a video went viral on social media. It showed Tiffany in a frantic state at a local department store. She was caught on camera trying to slip a designer dress into her bag, a dress she used to be able to afford with my credit card. The security guard didn't care about her excuses. She was publicly humiliated, a fallen socialite with nowhere left to hide. Her world was shrinking. While Tiffany struggled in the streets, I focused on the legal war. I hired the most vicious divorce attorney in the state for Marcus. We did not just ask for a simple split. We sued Tiffany for alienation of affection and attempted murder by neglect. We brought forth all the evidence of the drugging and the secret meetings with the wealth manager. During the first hearing, our legal team revealed the secret bank account Tiffany had hidden in the Cayman Islands. She looked smug for a second, thinking that money was safe. However, her face turned pale when Mr. Sterling stood up. He announced that I had already secured a court order to freeze every single cent in that account. She was officially penniless, fighting a legal battle she could never hope to win. I decided to take the story to the public. I gave a televised interview about the nursing home trap. I spoke with a calm, firm voice that reached millions of homes. I became the face of elder revenge, and people across the country started sharing their own stories of predatory relatives. The pressure from the public was so great that the district attorney had to take the case seriously. Tiffany's partner in crime, the wealth manager, was the first to break. When he realized he was facing 20 years in prison, he decided to flip on Tiffany to get a lighter sentence for himself. He turned over emails and recordings that proved she was the mastermind behind the entire plot. She was no longer just a bad daughter-in-law, she was a wanted criminal. The wealth manager's confession was even darker than I had expected. He revealed that Tiffany had a timeline for my life. She wasn't just planning to keep me in Silver Oaks forever. She had instructed him to find a way to gradually increase my daily medication once the house was sold. She wanted to make sure I didn't wake up at all after she got the money. Marcus was sitting in the courtroom when this was revealed. He grabbed the edge of the wooden bench until his knuckles turned white. He realized in that moment that his wife hadn't just been greedy, she had been a cold-blooded killer in training. He looked at me with tears of shame in his eyes, realizing he had almost helped a monster murder his own mother for a car. My final act of justice against the system was the most satisfying. I filed a massive lawsuit against Silver Oaks for the abuse and illegal detention. My lawyers were so effective that the nursing home was forced into a quick bankruptcy. When the property went up for auction, I was the only bidder. I bought the entire facility for pennies on the dollar. I walked through the gray hallways that once felt like a prison, but this time, I held the keys. I ordered the high fences to be torn down and the dark windows to be replaced with clear glass. I turned the building into a luxury retirement home for displaced artists. I personally vetted every single staff member to ensure they were kind. I turned a place of sorrow into a place of light. With her accounts frozen and her reputation in tatters, Tiffany was forced to find honest work for the first time in her life. She ended up taking a job at a low-end hospital cafeteria, wearing a stained apron and a hairnet. One afternoon, I decided to pay her a visit. I walked through the line, smelling the greasy steam and the sour mop water. When I reached the front, Tiffany froze, her eyes wide with shock. I looked down at the pale, watery soup she was ladling into plastic bowls. "This soup is far too cold, and the service is quite lacking," I said, my voice echoing off the tile walls. I was perfectly mimicking the exact complaints she used to hurl at my household staff. She stared at me, trembling with rage and shame, but she couldn't say a single word. Marcus came to see me at the mansion, hoping to move back into his old life of luxury. He thought that because Tiffany was gone, everything would return to the way it was before. I sat him down in the library and pulled out a fresh set of legal documents. "I have something to tell you, Marcus," I said firmly. I revealed that his trust fund had always been tied to a moral character clause in my will. Because he had been complicit in my suffering, even if he was drugged, the fund was officially diverted to the Elder Protection Foundation. He was shocked to find he was now as broke as Tiffany. "If you want a place in this family, you will work as a janitor at my new retirement home," I told him. He had to earn his redemption. The final piece of property Tiffany thought she owned was a luxury dream condo downtown. She had purchased it using money she had slowly funneled out of my business accounts over the last year. I didn't just sue to get the money back, I sued for the title of the condo itself. Within a month, the court awarded the property to me. I drove to the building and stood in the marble lobby. I didn't sell it, and I didn't move in. Instead, I called the woman Tiffany had fired and bullied for years, my former maid, Maria. I placed the keys into Maria's calloused hand. "This is yours now, Maria. A gift for your years of loyalty that Tiffany tried to destroy." Seeing the joy on Maria's face was better than any profit. I spent the next several weeks tracking down every single piece of jewelry Tiffany had sold during her frantic estate sale. I used a private investigator to find the buyers and offered them double what they paid to get my items back. I didn't care about the cost, I wanted my history restored. Eventually, I had every emerald, every gold band, and every pearl necklace back in my safe. That night, there was a high society gala where Tiffany was working as a temporary waitress to pay her mounting legal fees. I walked into the ballroom wearing every single piece of recovered jewelry at once. I glittered like a diamond under the chandeliers. Every time Tiffany walked by with a tray of appetizers, she had to look at the fortune she had lost forever. Subscribe to see the final hammer fall. The criminal trial finally reached its conclusion. With the wealth manager's testimony and my bribery videos, the jury didn't need long to deliberate. Tiffany was found guilty on all counts of elder abuse, fraud, and grand larceny. The judge was a woman who had seen too many families destroyed by greed, and she showed no mercy. Tiffany was sentenced to 5 years in a state prison. As the bailiffs moved in to lead her away in handcuffs, she looked at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. I stepped into the aisle and leaned in close as she passed by. "I will make sure the prison food is safe for you, dear," I whispered with a cold smile. "I wouldn't want you to have any accidents with your medication." She screamed as they dragged her out. Marcus took the job as a janitor at the retirement home without a single complaint. For the first few months, I watched him through the security cameras. I saw him scrubbing floors, emptying trash cans, and listening to the stories of the residents with genuine patience. He didn't look like the pampered man who wanted a Ferrari anymore. He looked tired, but his eyes were clear. He worked hard to prove he was no longer under Tiffany's dark spell. One evening, he came to the mansion and sat on the porch steps. He didn't ask for money or favors. He just thanked me for saving his life from the monster he had married. I saw a spark of the son I used to know. I realized he was finally learning that a person's true value is found in their work, not their bank account. I decided it was time for a final family meeting to discuss the future of the Grayson estate. I called Marcus into the library, where Mr. Sterling was waiting with a thick, leather-bound folder. "I have rewritten the will for the last time," I announced, looking my son straight in the eye. I revealed that the estate was no longer going to be handed over to a single person. Instead, everything was moved into a living trust. Marcus would be the manager of the trust, but there was a very strict catch. He would only keep that position and receive a modest salary if he stayed clean and worked for the foundation for 20 years. If he slipped up once, the entire empire would be donated to the city's hospitals. He nodded slowly, accepting the heavy responsibility with a humble heart. With the legal battles finished, I focused on restoring my home to its former glory. I hired craftsmen to repair the damage Tiffany's parties had caused to the floors and walls. I gathered all the modern furniture and cheap art she had bought with my stolen money. I piled it all in the center of the back lawn and started a massive bonfire. I watched the plastic and fake leather melt into ash under the night sky. It felt like I was burning away the last of the poison she had brought into my life. Just as the fire began to die down, my old gardener approached me. He was carrying something wrapped in a dusty tarp. He had hidden my grandmother's hand-carved rocking chair in his shed to keep it safe from the dumpster. I finally cried tears of pure relief. Before I closed this chapter of my life forever, I made one final trip to the state prison. I sat behind the thick glass partition and waited. When Tiffany was let out, I almost didn't recognize her. Her expensive hair extensions were gone, and her skin looked gray under the harsh fluorescent lights. She looked haggard and old. "You are a monster, Antonia," she spat, her voice cracking as she glared at me through the glass. I didn't get angry. I didn't feel the need to shout. I just leaned toward the microphone and gave her a calm, pitying smile. "No, Tiffany. I am not a monster," I replied softly. "I am just a mother who refused to walk into the home you built for me. You tried to bury me, but you forgot that I am the one who owns the ground." I sat on my porch in the hand-carved rocking chair, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The garden was silent and peaceful once again. Marcus was sitting on the steps nearby, helping the gardener plant new rose bushes for the spring. People think that as we grow older, we become shadows of ourselves. They think we grow forgetful and weak. But they're wrong. A mother's love is powerful, but a mother's memory is eternal. I remember every lie, every shove, and every betrayal. I also remember how to fight for what I built. The Grayson estate is secure, and my son is finally a man I can be proud of. I took a long, slow sip of my tea, feeling the warmth spread through my chest. The estate is secure. And the tea is perfectly hot. Thank you. Please like, share, and subscribe for more. Also turn on your notification bell so you be the first to get our next shocking revenge story.